kind of who am I and why should you listen to anything I say, and then why moving beyond chat to enterprise workflow is hard, what we're seeing play out. And then I'm going to talk about a little, some of the best practices from where I sit at OpenAI. So I'm Katrina Mulligan. As was mentioned, I am the head of national security partnerships at OpenAI. I've been at OpenAI for 2 years, which is considered a very long tenure at OpenAI. I've been at the company for longer than, I think, 85% of our employees now. Definitely more than 75%, last I checked. And I'm kind of an unusual fit for an AI company. I'm a mid-40s old lady who likes birds and is not an early adopter of technology. This is my first time ever working in a private sector company. My entire career before this was in the hard national security world, pretty much working at all the three-letter agencies you can imagine. Most recently came from being chief of staff to the Secretary of the Army, was in the most bureaucratic and traditional organization maybe in the world. So it was quite a frying pan to the face to go to OpenAI, where I suddenly went from being the youngest person in every meeting I was in to being the oldest person overnight. I had also never sent an emoji in a work communication prior to joining OpenAI, so it was quite a steep learning curve. But now I'm really in it. And a year ago, I moved from being in sort of a government relations-facing role to standing up OpenAI for Government, which is our government-facing business unit, because I became convinced, as painful as it was for me as a longtime policy person, that getting the government to understand the significance in the moment that it's in right now was going to require more than a really amazing policy conversation could solve. And it was going to involve getting the technology actually in the hands of people to really use it and understand how it's going to transform the way that government missions are performed. And so I'm as unlikely as it was that I was going to be at OpenAI in the first place, it's even more unlikely that I'm leading a business unit, because that is not the background that I come from, but in a weird way, it actually is exactly the right mentality to bring to bear on this problem. So, if you look at my background, it's all, Army. I was PDASD for SOLIC, for those of you fluent in acronyms. For those who aren't, that means I was number 2 in the Pentagon overseeing special operations. I previously served in the Department of Justice in the National Security Division, in the National Counterterrorism Center at the White House, overseeing the response to the Snowden disclosures, and before that, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So basically a very broad government career. So why should you listen to me? I basically spend all day, every day, talking to people who either are in the government or are trying to do business with the government to help them understand how AI can be transformational. And it is really difficult to get beyond pilot tinkering, right? And there's a couple of structural reasons why that's true. One is that the government is simply not funding AI as a capability. They're funding it as an IT line item right now. So the people in government who have budget to spend on AI are typically in the IT realm of the house. They're not in the mission side of the house, mostly. There are a few exceptions, but they're very few. And what that means is that most of the approaches that we're seeing in government with AI adoption, there's kind of 2 flavors. There's enterprise chat, being, some investments being made in enterprise chat for kind of general productivity use. And then there's teeny tiny pilots that are trying to create proofs of concept that could support bigger investments in bigger types of projects. But in my estimation, the way the pilots are currently being structured and funded, they're not likely to deliver on the potential for demonstrating what the technology can actually do. So a couple of things we're seeing in government. One is that government has really learned some hard lessons and is applying those lessons from the cloud wars to AI in ways that I'm not sure are actually going to work. So, with the cloud, I think a lot of departments and agencies got into like vendor lock-in situations that they really wanted to get out of. And so now with AI companies, there's this move to provide as many AI chat tools as possible in these model gardens. And the other thing that is emerging is, in the absence of accredited versions of those chat models, we're seeing a lot of government agencies build their own chat wrapper on top of our APIs. And we saw that in industry in the very beginning, and industry pretty much abandoned it. They tried it, realized that they were never going to be able to keep up with feature parity, and that actually it turns out that chat products are actually really being excellently developed by private industry off the shelf, and so they moved away from it. Government has not. The model gardens are challenging because I understand, while I am deeply sympathetic to the idea that you don't really know who's going to be the best fit for your workforce, the truth is that Brenda from HR is not going to benefit from having to choose between any number of different models to figure out which one is going to be optimal to do the work. And so at some level, there's a reason why most of industry is just choosing one of the products and rolling it out to their workforce. You do not see industry choosing 4 different ones and putting them in a model garden. I also think financially it's going to be unsustainable. We've all done these like $1 deals this year. It's not going to be sustainable for everybody to offer every model for basic chat functions. I also think model choice is really important at the developer level. It's way less important at the basic chat productivity level. And so I'm hopeful that government will begin to align around that, but I'm not seeing it happen yet. But so that's one reason why it's hard, is the way that it's being funded right now is treating it like an IT capability. And one of the arguments that I am making to the Hill and to others in the budgetary ecosystem is that we really need to be funding AI more like a capability, because it is one. And that's going to take some time. And so how do you bridge that, right? We're not going to see meaningful AI investment until FY27 at the earliest. And that is dependent upon a Congress that is not very dependable sometimes. And so, we are going to have to bridge that through, pilot projects and awkward funding vehicles. And what I'm seeing right now are pilots that, by and large, are too small for the ambitions of the technology. There's like a technological overhang. So I'll find, that I'll go in and talk to government, and they'll be like, I have a really big idea, and if you could solve this, it would be incredible. And I'm like, waiting with, I'm like leaning forward in my chair, and then it's like, I want to take the way that we do our performance process, and I want to automate how we could do our award packages. And I'm like, that is totally something that our commercial off-the-shelf products can do, any of them. You don't actually need to partner directly with the world's leading AI company to accomplish that. And I want to aim so much bigger than that. So what I am looking at when I go in and talk to, the Department of Army, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of, HHS, I am talking about end-to-end enterprise transformations of major workflows that exist that can save, hundreds and hundreds of hours per unit. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. We did a pilot project with the Department of the Army to just go into Army Contracting Command and figure out, like, what could we automate within the contracting workflow? Basic contracting workflow has pretty consistent sets of steps. Some of those steps probably could be automated. Some of them can't. Went through the entire workflow, and we figured out how to automate 500 hours worth of work in a single contract workflow. So there are 250,000 contracts that are done annually by the Army Contracting Command. So if you can save 500 hours on each contract that you do, you're now in like you're saving real time. You're actually like delivering massive results for the Army and for the public that it serves. But scaling that is going to be incredibly hard. So we built that out. We were able to demonstrate a proof of concept. We're now dealing with compliance hurdles and all of the other things that slow you down. We will figure those out probably in this quarter, and then be able to scale. And then there's all these other questions, like how are we going to fund a program that actually could scale this? How are we going to build it out? We at OpenAI are not going to try to be the ones who scale everything. We're going to be working with partners to scale the kinds of solutions that we're building. We're going to stay very lean and focus on places where we can really kind of Shawshank our way past the way that people are understanding things. And then we are going to work with partners to scale, because lots of partners are going to be better able to do that type of scaling work than we are. But that kind of brings me to, so I've talked a bit about what's hard. Kind of brings me to what are the best practices? What do we see from industry that really is making a difference? And I guess I would say a couple of things. The number one indicator of success in AI transformation that we see actually surprised me, and I'm curious if it may not surprise you. It's not level of investment, speed of adoption. It's not any metrics about frequency of use. It's one simple thing, and it's how much the leadership of the organization uses it. That is the biggest indicator of success that we see, and it was not obvious to me. The other thing we see in really effective enterprise transformations is two ingredients happening simultaneously. One is bottom up, and one is top down. The bottom up is just get some kind of chat productivity tool in the hands of your users and let them innovate. I don't think it needs to be 4 or 20 of them, just one tends to work. And then top down, it's identifying 3 to 5 core workflows that are essential to whatever it is that your organization does. And it looks different at every single organization that we look at. Sometimes it's has to do with business operations functions. Sometimes it has to do with delivering certain kinds of products and services. Sometimes it's it can be anything. But the key is that your leadership team identifies those 3 to 5 workflows that are essential to what you do, and then makes a big swing at what it would look like to do an end-to-end enterprise transformation of that workflow. And it doesn't mean that you're going to automate every single step in that workflow. That always, I think, unnerves people. It's that you work with the people who know that workflow to figure out which are the parts that can be reliably automated, what are the metrics that we can use to validate that, and which are the parts that absolutely can't be. And then you isolate that and you build the workflow around that, and then you deploy it and test it and iterate, and then you deploy it at scale. You don't deploy it all at once, but if you take 3 to 5 seems to be the sweet spot. It's not 10, it's not 20, and it's also not 1. But you find those workflows that can really be transformational, and you put a champion in charge of each of them who's empowered to remove obstacles from the team, and you execute. So I'm going to stop there, which I realize is a couple minutes early, but I wanted to give folks a chance to ask questions, because this audience may want to go in directions that are not the usual ones for me. So, yes. I mean, we work through the same compliance structures that the government has long had. It's challenging internally because, it turns out it's not easy inside of a company like mine to go and make the case for them to put 12 zero-sum engineers who make like an insane amount of money in a room doing nothing but FedRAMP compliance for a year. It turns out that it's hard to do that, and I know it because I've tried. But we have gotten there, and so we've made a lot of the investments. 2025 was a really big year in terms of foundational investments in the compliance infrastructure that we needed to be able to manage sensitive workflows. We're still not 100% there, but Q1 of this year is like going to be hopefully the finishing touches. But the compliance frameworks already exist, and it's just more a matter of companies like ours being willing to make the investments to meet and exceed those bars.
If you found this useful, there's a lot more waiting for you on demand. To access all of our previous AI events and content, become a member today. Membership gives you exclusive access to members-only articles, practical frameworks and templates, and over 200 hours of expert-led video content, as well as on-demand recordings from our presentations and events. You'll also have the chance to join us live at upcoming sessions with leading voices in artificial intelligence. To get started, head to the link in the description and join our AI community today.